Okay, do we have everybody?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 18th, 2020 regular board meeting of the State College Area Board of Directors. I would like to ask everyone to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who's here with us this evening viewing remotely. And I'd like to announce the board held an executive session May 11th regarding negotiations and prior to this meeting on legal matters and negotiations. Board members, with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Dr. O'Donnell?
Yeah. Yes, in relationship to the action item regarding the Young Scholars renewal, I would just like to have Randy Brown and Scott share an update just regarding the property lease of the school not being in place beyond June, and that I think we may, we'd like to table that item until we clarify that. I'll have Randy share an update and Scott as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As Dr. O'Donnell mentioned, the lease does expire on June 30, 2020. Late last week, I did reach out to the school to obtain a copy of the new lease that will be in effect on July 1. Although we did get a correspondence from the school that they are in the process of obtaining that new lease, the negotiations have not been completed and therefore they have not received that. However, because of that, the administration would like to change our recommendation. As Dr. O'Donnell mentioned, we recommend tabling this item until receiving a copy of the new lease. Given a school of this size, serving the number of students and families in our district, in our community, as it does, we believe having the lease in place before approving the charter is the reasonable and responsible action for the school board and taxpayers.
Okay.
And I would concur with what Randy said.
Okay, board members, any questions on this item or discussion on postponing this item at this time? Looking for raised hands or Jim?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. All right. I don't.
I'd point out.
Scott.
Yeah, I'd point out that you know, I believe that there was a reference to a lease matter in their financial statements from 2019 that referred to some fairly substantial penalties and/or late fees as a result of a settlement for some dispute between the charter school and their landlord. So, you know, especially considering that and the potential financial implication to the taxpayer associated with Young Scholars, even though they are, you know, they receive money directly through the district. I think that this is also a good idea because there was an issue this past year relative to the lease. So I think it would be prudent to hold off any consideration of approving or denying the charter until we have that information.
And just one other final point, the settlement does call, as reported in their financial statements, the settlement called for an immediate negotiation of a new lease which has not yet been provided.
So even the settlement called for them to renegotiate and they still haven't done that, or they just haven't accomplished it, or kind of what information did you get from them, Randy?
That the negotiations had not been successfully completed yet.
Okay, so we don't know how long they've been going on and whether they fulfilled the terms of their settlement or not, or whatever it might be.
Correct.
Okay.
Dr. Etter, did you have anything to add for our consideration on this topic?
No, I mean, as Randy had alluded to, I think it's a very significant issue of a school of this size with this many students that we're a little bit over 30 days from the expiration of the current lease and not that far from the beginning of a new school year, assuming we have one, and they don't have a lease in place. And in particular, as Mr. Fazzard said too, that a prior settlement agreement that wasn't a recent one by any stretch of the imagination called for them to get this done, and they still haven't gotten it done. So it's a concern.
Okay.
And can I add that the date for that settlement was December 12th of last year. So we've
Of
had
2019.
2019. So we've had 4 or 5 months in which they were to be working on the new lease agreement, and apparently it hasn't come forward yet.
Okay. Any other questions or considerations on this item? Okay, so that will be removed from this meeting's agenda, for at least for this evening. Okay, board members, with the agenda before you, are there any other changes or requests on the agenda? Okay, all right, seeing none, then Dr. O'Donnell will now review some housekeeping items related to the COVID-19 pandemic and our unique format for these meetings.
Thank you. Due to Governor Wolf's mandated school closings and stay-at-home order as a result of COVID-19, this will be a virtual meeting via Zoom webinar. Nick Sepp will serve as the host of tonight's virtual meeting. The IT help desk is available during the meeting if the community encounters technical difficulties at 814-231-7743. A few notes for meeting participants. When board or community members want to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom program accessed under the participants tab. The host will lower hands and mute and unmute speakers as necessary to assist the flow of that part of our meeting. Pursuant to board policy 3, at least 5 board members shall be present in the boardroom, 4 of whom must be physically present, with a 5th and or additional member or members able to participate remotely. As a result of the global pandemic, all board members are participating remotely. Policy 9 provides that where discretion is directly and or by implication granted to the board may depart from policy. Given the extraordinary times and circumstances that we find ourselves in, the board is choosing to exercise its discretion and depart from policy 3's requirements of at least 4 board members being physically present. The board will continue to monitor the situation and make decisions on a case-by-case basis to continue or not with meetings in this manner. The board will return to strict adherence with policy 3 as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. At this time, we're going to have a roll call of board members. I'd like to call on the board secretary for that roll call. Thank you.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms.
Sorry.
Bedell, that's okay. Ms. Bedell.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Mr. Fozard.
Here.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Here.
Mr. Leos.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here.
Okay, at this time on the agenda, we have time for communications. First, the superintendent's report under communications. Dr. O'Donnell.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts from Troop 31 who are viewing the board meeting remotely this evening. They're working to earn their community merit badge. So welcome to all the boys and girls, Girl Scouts who are with us this evening. Next item I have pertains to graduation. Just some updates and reminders. We have 2 events coming up to honor our graduating seniors. State College Light Up the Night taking place this Wednesday, May 20th. As part of a community-wide effort, we're turning on the lights and scoreboards at some of our athletic facilities for 20 minutes at 8 p.m., which happens to be 2020 military time. 8:20 p.m., excuse me, scoreboard messages will recognize the class of 2020 for its achievement and local medical personnel and first responders for their work during the pandemic. From 8 to 9 p.m., there will also be a radio broadcast featuring interviews with students, some faculty and staff, medical personnel, and first responders, and music from the State High Marching Band. So to listen, tune into Magic FM, which is 93.7 on FM. We won't be able to permit students, family, and community supporters on our high school grounds during that event. The senior parade, Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m. The plans to have a drive-through parade across our State High campus for seniors and their families to replace our traditional elementary school visits and commencement teacher tunnel. Teachers and staff members standing at a safe distance from each other will cheer students along the route. Details for students and families will be shared with students. I believe that'll be next Monday from Mr. Johnson. So we're planning to broadcast that parade, and we'll post that information. On June 6th, we'll be hosting or communicating our virtual graduation ceremony. I know I've been collaborating with the high school as well as the student speakers to continue planning for that. Last item regarding graduation, we have photographer and diploma distribution June 9th through 11th. We'll be sharing the schedule of the photographer for those dates with seniors. I know many students are doing their own photos at this time on our high school campus. Students will have two options for receiving their diplomas, either picking it up in person at the high school during the photographer window or choosing a high school teacher or administrator to deliver it. And that information has been shared by Mr. Johnson. Next, I'd like to just share a little bit of communications pertaining to the budget remarks for this evening. I'd like to share some information regarding staffing and program plans for the fall, just how we're approaching it at this time and why. We'll be speaking with more detail regarding the budget update with the board's action item here a little later on the agenda. As we shared with the board recently, we've placed a freeze on hiring new positions into the district at this time. We're going to hold on that until we understand several key parameters for the district. First, our budget scenario. To date, we've had nearly 10 million in shifts within our budget due to decreases in revenue projections for next year. This doesn't include any program cuts to date. However, we will stand a chance to face additional major financial challenges coming to us. That is, we could experience an additional $10 million less in revenue depending on our local and state economic circumstances. In that case, we would have nearly a $20 million or 12% reduction from our initial budget projections in early March. If we're facing with that scenario, we'll then experience very serious impacts on our district programs and operations. Therefore, we must hold on new hires to the district at this time. Hopefully, we'll be able to fill many of those roles through either transfers within the district as well as some replacements with new hires to the district. Once we understand our financial situation, we'll look to the state for direction on our status as a community. That is, we'll learn whether we may safely have students in school buildings or not. From there, we'll share our educational model and what it'll look like for the fall, followed by staffing priorities within our budget to carry out that model. Please know that we're beginning to reflect on how this remote model met both our faculty's and students and their families' needs here since late March. Therefore, we're constructing some feedback surveys for faculty, students, and parents. That information will help us understand what we could have done better, as well as what we need to prioritize as we look toward the fall. If we are in schools or in some version of remote learning, we expect that feedback to be very helpful to our faculty, principals, and our curriculum leaders. So I know our finance team and I will go into further details later on the agenda and field questions and conversation with the board. However, we wanted to clarify those points on the front end of our agenda tonight. Finally, I'd just like to share how we're structuring planning teams toward the fall. We're looking at 3 different leadership teams, the first being relating to health and wellness, second related to our educational model, and the third related to our operations. It's almost like a visual triangle as all 3 teams will be collaborating. However, at the top of the triangle will be the health and wellness, as we want to take direction from our planning team, which includes regional experts Obviously, we'll look to the Department of Health and what's coming down from the state, but then we'll also plan locally. So I wanted to share that with you on the front end of the agenda, and that concludes my updates at this time.
Oops, thank you. At this time, we have time for the legislative update.
Okay, I can share a couple of things real briefly. The CEO of PSBA testified at the Education Committee of the Senate this week, and the points they made will be familiar to people here. We asked for maintained by the state investments for public education for the 2021 state budget. That we provide savings by adopting charter school funding reforms. That's been a major push. And to provide additional savings and flexibility by having mandate relief. The other two items that I think are worth noting is we testified to the fact of the added expenses that many districts faced in the spring, trying to make these adjustments, and the challenges that many school districts have had in terms of not having access to affordable broadband. And so that was the essence of the testimony that was given this week.
Okay, thank you. Gretchen, do you have anything from the COG update?
I do not. The executive committee has not met since our last meeting, so nothing today.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I just had my hand up because I thought I heard Dr. O'Donnell in your comments about the parade. I thought you said Thursday, Thursday, May 27th, and it's Wednesday, May 27th, right? Is
Correct. Sorry
okay?
about that.
No, it's okay. And, thanks to everybody that's, as a parent of a senior, I'm extremely grateful at all the work and thought that's gone into this. So I very much appreciate it.
We'll also have a place along the route for the board as well. I know that you distribute all the diplomas every year, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for that event on Wednesday. Thanks, Jim. If you were planning for Thursday, you'd miss it. Sorry about that.
I understand that the Borough of State College has a resolution on their agenda this evening honoring the class of 2020 from our school district. So thought I'd mention that under communications.
And their police department's been planning that out with us, the route, all the details, so that we're working arm in arm with them, and very appreciative of that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. At this time on the agenda, we have time for public comment. If anyone who's in attendance virtually this evening would like to make a public comment, I'll just look for raised hands. And I'll give you a couple moments here since I know it can take time. Okay, I see Steve Schwartzer has his hand raised. And if you could state your full name and where you reside in the district.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Schwartzer. I was hoping somebody else would speak first, but here we go. I reside in College Township. I'm a parent of 2 students in the district, and I'm also an educator. And I'm here tonight because I received an email last week. And the email stated that essentially due to unexpected budget constraints, the International Baccalaureate program would need to be significantly pared down for the upcoming year. For those of you who may be less familiar with the program, IB program, as it's more commonly called, it's something that's truly special and comprehensive program offered at the high school level. And I could say a lot of things about it, but probably best just to say, like, I found myself talking to the Associate Dean of Admissions at a top local university a few months back. And when I happened to mention the IB program, she just lit up and couldn't say enough positive things about it. And that's kind of all I needed to know about the program. So I initially intended to speak tonight because I was confused. How could this program that really aligns so closely with things our district values so dearly, how could that program be the first one on the chopping block? I had intended to ask why we were eliminating another program that explicitly challenges students to be more actively involved in community service. I'd intended to ask why we were decimating a program that so clearly values diverse perspectives. I had intended to ask why we were choosing to decimate a program that so clearly prepares our students for lifelong success through excellence in education. And then I started talking to folks. I talked to a lot of parents. I talked to some administrators, talked to some teachers, and I learned. I mean, we're learning. Obviously, it's difficult times. A lot of difficult decisions need to be made. Folks I spoke with, I had administrators call me on Friday afternoon, late Saturday morning. Very impressive. Smart people, good people, well-intended, open, honest, everything that I could hope for. District's clearly in good hands. I appreciate all that. I greatly respect the desire to retain our faculty, our staff. I agree with it. I hope we can. I don't want to argue that we should save the IB program at all costs. If that means, you know, somebody else's kid is going to go to school without a principal, or someone's going to try to do their job without a competent administrative assistant. I don't question the competence or intention of anybody in that district. Great people. My takeaway from my conversations, I'm going to try to wrap up. I don't want to take up too much of the time here. Is that if there's a couple things I could hope that we do moving forward, is simply if we need to make difficult decisions, that we continue to operate with the utmost precision. And by that, I mean taking a wider lens. Right now, it seems like from what I was, the information I was given to the IB program, it's based upon who is retiring in which departments and not being able to replace those positions, and then trying to mold programming as best we can around the personnel that is left. And again, I admire and hope we can retain who we have. However, given the context of the upcoming year, a few questions that come to mind is should we be basing our important decisions based upon who is left within a particular department, or should we be basing it upon our larger priorities and values as a district community? Two guiding questions I'd love to see asked throughout the process and coming up. How likely are we going to be able to deliver a particular experience, program, et cetera, that we are budgeting for, given the forecast of the upcoming year and the possibility of having periods where schools are shut down? Number two, how closely does expense A align with our goals and values when compared to expense B, C, and D? So again, question one, how likely are we going to be to deliver it next year? While no one has a crystal ball to answer that question with 100% accuracy, I think we can all agree that we need to plan for a lot of contingencies this year. Again, how likely are we going to be able to deliver it next year? If schools need to be shut down again at some point, which experiences will we still be able to deliver to our students? If we reserve money for X instead of hiring a principal, a science teacher, or an administrative assistant, are we certain that we can deliver it regardless of how things play out in the upcoming year? Question number two that I hope we continue to ask ourselves is how closely does each budget item align with the highest priorities of the SCASD community? And again, this is not to question any of the folks I spoke with. They were excellent. They're thorough, they're smart, and I am absolutely certain nothing but the best of intentions.
Mr. Schwartzer, yeah, thank you so much for your comments. We're a little over our 3 minutes, but
thank you.
Your comments are very thoughtful. I think many of us share, a lot of the same, concern and angst about wanting to make sure that we provide these kind of programs. If you could send us an email and we could correspond with you that way. It's all-board@scasd.org. I'm sure we'd be happy to correspond with you. And if you would like to stick around for later in the agenda, we'll be discussing these budget decision processes a little further. So, so that will be part of this evening's agenda as well. So thank you very much for your comments and for having those conversations with administrators. The IB program is certainly, was a big priority of our board and administration to get that off the ground over the past few years. So none of these decisions are simple or easy at this time. So thank you. Is anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? All right. Seeing none, then I think we'll move on to routine approvals. At this time, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
Scott Fazard, so moved.
Okay, that's been, I heard
Fazard, who was the second?
Me, Jim Leas.
Okay. Thank you.
okay. Are there any questions or discussion regarding any of the items on routine approvals then? Laura?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. I appreciate Ed got back to me late with a couple of questions, but since others might have had them as well, I just wanted to get them out in front of people. There's a pretty major expense under number 5E, which is the operations service contracts for electrostatic sprayers. And I understand that's a new thing that we're getting. And can you just talk a little about that, please?
Sure, Laurel. Electrostatic sprayers we're purchasing would be in common vernacular, maybe called foggers. They are similar to what you're seeing on many news reports of people walking with a backpack and spraying disinfectant mist. Currently, when we do our disinfecting, we're doing it with plastic spray bottles and hand triggers, like you would with your home cleaner. In the world prior to March, that was sufficient for the amount of disinfecting we did. In anticipating of having a much greater need to disinfect, we're purchasing these electrostatic sprayers for our custodians. Not only do they improve the efficiency, they also put an electric static charge on the water droplets so that they adhere around a surface rather than just landing on the top of a surface. So the efficacy is greatly improved. You get cover more ground with less material, and you get better adherence to all surfaces. So we'll be using these sprayers in our routine disinfecting in the coming year, as well as for specialty items. And they can be used for really any product. We'll be using it with our disinfectant, but they could be used for other products and uses as well. We're just trying to be in a better situation for when students arrive back and the need for disinfection ramps up.
Thank you. I think a lot of people have been looking at what are we changing, so it's good. I think people will be pleased to hear about that. And you said it's under a state bid, so yeah.
Yes.
And just, I've asked this before, but there's a long list of things, and I know that you look carefully at different bidders and different providers, but it would be nice to see what that rotation is. If someone's there, I'm not expecting it every year, but last looked at 2 years ago or will be reviewed in 2 years, something like that, I think is valuable information for us to have and for the community to know that we do review these things on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, this year it was far less.
Sure.
Other years, I can tell you we did, because we had some started early, we Schwartz fire protection jumps to mind that we actually had that one reviewed and closed out prior to getting into the middle of March. But many of the others on the service contract end, we are renewing just because of the difficulty in trying to get that item turned around for a detailed, fair comparison of competitive services. And that's on the service contract end. Many of the other ones for, you'll notice like for routine maintenance parts, we may ask for pre-approval on five vendors. Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, Your Building Center, and then individual purchases are shopped among those 5 vendors. So while this memo doesn't shop it, it allows my staff the ability to shop individual purchases throughout the year with the pre-approved vendors that are on the contract. So it's kind of the memo's pretty lengthy, and it mixes equipment purchases with service contracts, with what we would call blanket purchase orders and vendor approvals. So apologize that it's not more clear, but I will comment that on the service contract end, we did not do a lot of comparisons. Hopefully that'll change, and we'll be able to do a little bit more detailed work on that next year. And in fact, next year we may want to open up all of the service contracts just because of the unusual circumstances this year.
Any other questions on routine approvals? Okay, seeing none is then we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote on the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Cosard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Then moving on to action item B is a motion to approve the elementary project change orders as presented in attachment 6B.
Lori Bedell,
Duffy, so moved.
Okay, that's been moved and
I got-
seconded. Great. Any questions or discussion on this item? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Cosard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item C is a motion to approve the bid for Park Forest Middle School water line replacement. This is shown in attachment 6C.
Duffy, so moved.
Bader, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item?
Just a quick question for Ed.
Mhm.
And this is a process question. I'm amazed at the difference between the bids in this collection. I mean, one 3 times higher, the highest bid is 3 times higher than the low bid. That was incredible.
I was certainly surprised as well. The low bidder is a firm we've used before successfully. We've never had a problem with them. If I weren't saying that, I would say I was very concerned by the price.
It occurred to me too, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it's good for us, and then feel like we'll get a good bargain on this project.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Cosard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to approve the supplemental tax rebate for 2020, 2021. This is shown in attachment 6D.
Leah, so moved.
Bizarre.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fozard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item E is a motion to amend the 2019-2020 resolution for the supplemental tax rebate as shown in attachment 6E.
Leah, so moved.
Duffy, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fozard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Okay, that item has passed. Item F is a motion to approve the food service breakfast and lunch prices for the 2020-2021 school year as shown in attachment 6F.
Bedell, so moved.
Leah, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Mr. Fozard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item G is a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with the State College Educational Support Personnel Association. This is shown in attachment 6G.
Duffy, moved. So moved.
Leah, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
Amber, I'd just like to say that we're
Yeah.
extremely grateful for these for this MOU. It
Absolutely.
certainly help us with budgeting, and we're
Mhm.
very appreciative to our bargaining units and our employees for considering this, and you know, hopefully everything will turn out okay, but in case it doesn't, this is in place.
Yeah, very grateful. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item H is a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, or AFSCME. This is shown in attachment 6H.
Leah,
Duffy,
so
so moved.
moved.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
Who was the second, please?
Well,
I have-
Was it
Jim and
Dan?
yeah, I was in there too. Jim and I were in it, I think. Hard to
Perfect.
say who was first.
Okay, thank you.
I just think both of these items are significant helps for us to protect programs for kids. And obviously, you know, jobs play into what we're trying to protect as well. But as we prioritize programming for students, look at requirements, look at student enrollment numbers, and respond to them with board-approved programs, these actions are a big help by these employees.
Agreed.
And I, as one member, I really appreciate the collaborative approach to this, and the fact that we could either approach our our employees, or the employees sometimes even approach us during these difficult times, and they're open to discussion, open to a collaborative approach. This is not hardline negotiating. This is simply problem solving, mutual problem solving, which I think was very highly valued. It's highly valued, I think.
Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Badel,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fozard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Okay, and I'd really like to extend the whole board's sincere appreciation to both of these organizations for their unwavering support during these unprecedented times. It really speaks volumes about their commitment to the State College Area School District, and our community really appreciates that. The board is really grateful. So thank you.
Amber?
Yes, Lori?
Sorry, my hand was raised, but you missed. I just want to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Just for clarification to the community about what this is all about. These groups they're making sacrifices for the school district. So in case people aren't looking at what's online or reading the documents, they're taking pay freezes and all kinds of stuff for us. So that's a huge sacrifice, and we're really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. Item I is a motion to approve the 2020-2021 proposed final budget. This is shown in attachment 6I.
Badal, so moved.
Duffy, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. I think we'll have some further presentation here by Randy Brown or Dr. O'Donnell.
I'll kick it off, and then I'm going to have Randy have a presentation with you, and then we'll enter some discussion and answer any questions you may have. I'll kick it off. So tonight,
thank you.
Our request for you to approve the proposed final budget for 2021 is a step in the process, and it's not the final step. Obviously, late June is when we'll ask you to consider a final action for next year's budget. So this budget includes several key assumptions. First, it presumes that Penn State students return to campus this coming fall. Second, we prioritize limiting the impact on student experiences if we are in our school buildings for the fall, or if we're remote, or some version of both. We prioritize avoiding furlough or layoffs of staff members. We want to maximize the use of our staff, as we do every year. And I'll speak to student programs in a little bit. We're waiting for as much information as possible in order to make the best staffing decisions possible, and where we have flexibility to shift staff who have multiple certification areas and expertise, we're working on that now. We're using state parameters as well as guidance from our local health and emergency response professionals to finalize and work toward our educational model options for the fall. We're maintaining resources in the budget to address directives and recommendations from the CDC, the State Department of Health, and our region, with the health professionals who are collaborating with us throughout the pandemic regarding our school day and general operations of our district. Although we'll speak to the financial parameters tonight, we do not have enough information to speak about the status of every single program at this time. In the budget scenario for action tonight, we still have to understand key impacts of state funding as well as our educational model prior to finalizing our plans pertaining to this particular scenario. So we hope to finalize our direction during the month of June so that we have more clarity, obviously, but then also what our budget proposal is supporting. So I do want to speak individually to the IB program. We are carrying out, just to clarify, we are carrying out the 12th grade full course program that enables students to earn the IB diploma. We did have 13 students who would be entering 11th grade for the fall who expressed interest in pursuing that IB diploma, which we're trying to get this program off the ground and shifting staff to support it. You know, this 13 is a really low number. Please recall, we didn't increase our faculty to run IB. So therefore, we need students to shift, so to speak, into IB. Thus, a small cohort increases class sizes in other required core subject classes. So we're not finalizing our schedule at this time, and that's my fault for not ensuring that all of us on our team were on the same page. We're not making program decisions at this time as far as any reductions. So we would typically run individual courses. We would not typically run courses at 12 students or below, or if they had a negative impact on other class sizes. I know last year we ran one or two sections of IB, particular IB math classes that in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have run because they caused an impact on other math sections in the high school to be close to 30 students. And that really wasn't good use of staffing when we think of best leveraging our professionals for student learning. I realized that was our first year of getting IB off the ground, and we're trying to do that. Regardless of staffing challenges or low enrollment for some of the IB courses, we will run several IB courses, but we might not have enough of the full option of courses that would enable these kids entering 11th grade to get the full diploma. So once we understand more information, we'll update the board, students, and those families. Another $10 million, if we see a worst scenario, that's a $20 million shift. And this school district has never seen anything like it. That would be 4 times the amount of challenge that we had in 2011. So I want everybody to understand that is uncharted territory for us, and it would absolutely have an impact on programs. And we will share how we will align proposals to our strategic plan, our requirements of the state, of our local district, which is run through the board policy for graduation requirements. And we'll have a lot of discussion, I'm sure, as well as input into any difficult decisions like that. So following Randy Brown's update, I know that Will Stout and Chris Merritt are with us this evening. So if you have any other clarifying questions around programs such as that, I know that was a communication to parents that we haven't made a decision, and that's my mistake for that. So right now we're not final with that. So at this time, I know we presented some additional information at our finance committee meeting last week, and that information also included in tonight's update for the full board. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Randy, and I appreciate Randy and your team for continuously refining this detailed information. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. If we could have the presentation put up on the screen, please. We'll start on slide 3. Just reviewing that tonight, we are asking that you approve the proposed final budget. And then on June 29th, we will ask you to approve the final budget, which is when you also set the real estate tax rate. So can we have the presentation, please? I'm on slide 4. Thank you. Just reiterating once again that we do revise our projections and review our estimates for the 2019-2020 revenue. However, that we do not have any revisions to recommend or to present to you this evening. Moving to slide 5 is the expenses, and the same holds true there. So we're looking at about $166 million in expenses. Moving on to the next slide, looking at 2020-2021 revenue. We have made some slight adjustments in our current real estate tax and our tuition revenue. And then previously there had been there's also been some adjustments for reimbursement for retirement and Social Security, and then a slight adjustment for property tax reduction. The change to current real estate tax is in relationship to an adjustment we made to our assessed value change. and understanding from our county assessment office and clarifying with our solicitor about the potential for tax appeals impacting our revenue for next year. Also on the tuition, we are including a recommended increase to our SEAL program fees that we had not been including previously. When we move to expenses on slide 7, there are many lines here that are highlighted in yellow, and those are the ones that will impact or that have had an impact since the last board discussion. We went through many of this information in the finance committee meeting last week, but the salaries and all of the benefit lines, which is the first 4 lines there, they have been adjusted to reflect the negotiations and conversations and the MOUs from the different bargaining units that you have begun to approve tonight, as well as the agreements that you've modified and amended previously. There are also adjustments to the various services, charter school expense, supplies, minor capital, and transfers and contingencies. And we'll talk about some of those here in a little bit. So we're looking at $158 million in expenses, then that does include transfer to the COVID fund balance area that we are proposing to create to help with future year budgets, as well as the PSERS use of fund balance from the PSERS that has been set aside previously. Moving on to slide 8, we want to just talk about the budget. Again, we are assuming that SCASD students are in person for fall. Part of that decision is dependent upon as we understand it, the county must be in a green status. We must get direction from the Secretaries of Health and Education. And then we'll also be taking advice and guidance from our local emergency management team, which includes medical and health professionals. Slide 9, we talk about our revenue. Our local revenue is $9.6 million projected lower than it was estimated in early March. And again, I'm not trying to harbor or to be repetitive, but just to make sure that everyone in our community understands that our revenue is, we are locally funded. The vast majority of our local revenue comes from real estate tax, so we are dependent on Penn State's fall status because we need taxpayers who are able to pay their bills. We have an assumption of some new properties being added to the tax rolls, and there are also an allotment made for a decline in our assessed value because of some pending settlements that are outstanding. Earned income tax will also be impacted as unemployment rises, and also some business closures, which result in some self-employment tax decreasing as well. Moving on to slide 10, I did talk briefly about the local revenue and where we had some projected increases, and also with the state and federal, we are all of our subsidies at the state and federal level, we are assuming that they are declining, but we also assume that we are going to have an offset by the CARES funding, which we are expecting right around $600,000 of that. So any decrease in state or federal funding in excess of about $600,000 will cause us to not meet our budget in those areas. Looking at slide 11, on the 2020-21 expenses, we are, as Dr. O'Donnell, talking about staffing decisions very carefully. First of all, they are very revenue dependent. If our local and state revenues come in higher than expected, and we see strong evidence of that, then we'll be able to ask you to expand some of our employee offerings and hire more positions, more in excess of what's been included in the budget. It's going to be dependent on our learning model, There's cost implications related to cleaning, disinfecting, social distancing, and changes to school operations. We do have limited contingency for those items, but until we understand the full extent of what will be necessary, we have to be cautious and keep that in mind. Moving on to slide 12, where we talk about our staffing. It is a great desire of ours, and I believe that Dr. O'Donnell mentioned this already, is to avoid furloughs of any type. And so we are trying to do everything that we can to use our staff, the staffing levels most appropriately to present our student program as well as run our operations for the district. We have a hiring freeze, so all vacant positions are on, replacing those are on hold, and we are looking to temporarily accommodate some of those positions. We have recorded about $2.4 million in estimated reductions from vacant positions. And again, if we, being revenue dependent, if maybe we can return some of those to the budget. We are looking for a clear enrollment picture because of, at the elementary level especially, and all of our required positions, whether that be of state mandate or state regulation, local policy, we'll go through an internal posting process first, if not only. Moving to slide 13, we are deferring a lot of expenses, specifically in supplies, in a lot of services, in repairs and deferred maintenance. This is not a long-term plan that we can do, but it is something that allows us to avoid program cuts, furloughs, staffing modifications, and therefore we are taking those in our budget proposal at this time. And if we are able to fund some of those things as the year goes on, then we will return them to the budget. We have about $2.5 million in other in non-employee expense reductions. However, offsetting those reductions is an estimated $550,000 food service department loss. Again, this is not necessarily worst case scenario, but it is a scenario where we believe that our costs are going to be much greater in food service than the revenue. And even though they're to be self-supporting, the general fund will, in order to maintain those programs, the general fund will need to offset those losses. In our staffing area on slide 14, we see that there are 27 teaching and administrative retirements and resignations. 11 of those are expected to be replaced. 8 with, right now, we're expecting 8 of those will be replaced with existing employees. There are 10 positions on hold and 6 positions which are not funded. The non-personnel expenses, just briefly, it relates to equipment, professional development, maintenance, supplies, conference travel, reductions and deferrals. The rate freeze that we've negotiated with our bus carriers, 10% reduction in all school building budgets, deferred maintenance and supplies and physical plant, combining some middle school sports and activities, deferring some athletic uniform purchases. Rate, I already said that. Travel budgets have been reduced 50% for all non-school building budgets, and we have reduced the capital reserve transfer. If we move to slide 16, I apologize if you're able, I hope that most of you are able to expand this on your screen, but the purpose of showing you this screen is to, this slide is to show you that at the end of this fiscal year in June of 2020, we expect to have $12,600,000 in unassigned fund balance in our general fund. And as you can see, over the next couple of years, we are able to maintain that. And that's going to be right around 8% of our general fund expenses. And when, and that's an amount that is allowed by our PDE and by the state. But in 23-24, given our revenue assumptions as we know them now and our expense assumptions as we know them now, that unassigned fund balance starts to drop, and it drops even further in 24-25. And in the next couple slides, I'm going to show you several different presentations so that you can gain a better understanding of that. On slide 17, you can see that general fund unassigned fund balance by a percentage of expenses is hovering right at 8%. The first couple of years drops slightly, and then it drops even more in 23-24 to under 5%, and then in 24-25 it drops to 2%, to under 2%. If we go to slide 18, this is why, because the blue line shows, which is the bottom line of this graph, shows the revenue and how our revenue is projected to grow over the next 5 years. And then the red line, which is the line on top, is expected to grow at an even faster rate. And so because those expenses are expected to grow, and these are our projections, but they are given all of the information that we have right now, we are expecting that our expenses growth will exceed our revenue growth, and that we'll actually also be using our available fund balance. How much of our fund balance will we use? Well, if we move over to slide 19 and we go out for a full 10 years, you see that our preliminary budget presented back earlier this year in December showed that we had projected general fund balance of between 10 and 20 million. It was probably about 12 or 13 and growing to 15, 16, 17 million in this projection period. But if looking at the proposed final budget, which we are presenting for you tonight, you see that general fund balance, projected general fund balance actually becomes negative throughout this 10-year projection. And I know that I'm just giving this as an example. However, even if you just look at the first 5 years, which is where we are primarily concerned with, you see that red line, it drops below, and in 24-25 is almost non-existent. Moving on to the next slide, excuse me, is something else that we want to share with you as a concern that we have, and that is the Act 1 index. This is a history of the Act 1 index since it started in 2006. This year's Act 1 index is 2.6%. Again, for those that may not be familiar, this is the maximum amount that a district may increase the real estate tax rate without going to exceptions. With the shrinking economy, with the economic struggles that we're all going through, especially here in the state of Pennsylvania, but also the United States, the Act 1 index is expected to fall. And the lowest point, the Act 1 index was 1.4% back in 2011-12. I'm not going to speculate where I believe that it will drop to, but I will share that I do believe that it will drop. And from the levels that we've been seeing, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. And so that's something else that we need to be mindful of, because our revenue projections do include, after what we believe to be about a 2 or 3 year cycle, the economy to recover, that the real estate tax rate would be able to increase by about 2%. So if that Act 1 index does decline, and it does decline for a longer period than what our projections show, then we may be in for some additional lower revenues than what we've projected. Hopefully that will not come to be, but it is just something that we will, as we always do, but in this time, these times we will be monitoring them even more closely. Just to complete tonight, just on the slide 21, please, just want to give you our timeline and show you that tonight is when we asked you to approve the proposed final budget. Approve the final budget is June 29th. We have 2 more board meetings where we'll talk about the budget. On June 15th, there'll also be a budget hearing at 7 o'clock with the full board meeting immediately following. So we want to give you and the community ample time to discuss the budget, to ask questions, to become more informed. But I do want to also mention that normally we would be asking you to approve the final budget on June 1st. And what does that mean to us? That means that by not approving until June 29th, until we have that confidence, that vote of confidence or that action on your part to set the tax rate, it's difficult for us to begin the process of printing the bills. And so they will be getting out. Normally your real estate tax bills are out on July 1st in the taxpayer's hand, and we can begin that process of receiving those funds. So that they will be slightly delayed because it is a couple-week process to get those processed. So I just wanted to point that out. But we believe that moving to the 29th for an approval will give us the best information possible, especially this year, for a state budget and also for Penn State's actions, and to hopefully they announce their intentions at least in the middle of June, and then we can make any budgetary changes or begin to think about programmatic changes and the effect on our budget that they would have. So I don't have any other questions at this time. I'm sorry, statements at this time. I'll take questions if you have any. Is there any questions?
I don't see any. I'm looking for raised hands. I don't see any. Oh, Laurel, yeah.
I think you pretty much answered it. I'm just confirming it. We passed this, but the whole point of why we're giving ourselves this time, or giving you this time, giving the community time, is that the numbers can change by the time we pass the final. So it's a proposed final. It is not a final.
Correct.
Right.
And I didn't create this process. This is according to Act 1 of 2006. You didn't create this process either. This proposed final budget is a requirement. It gives the community notice of what your intention related to, especially a tax rate for next year, as well as a budget implications. And there are some legal advertisements that we are required to complete, and we'll be doing those in the next week or so. And then, like I said, then there'll also be the budget hearing, which is a special, unique meeting solely for the purpose of talking about the budget.
And in fact, we committed back in January, is that right? That we would not be we already made some commitments to the community that we would not go above the Act 1 index.
In December, you committed that you would not go above the Act 1 index. In March, since late March, actually since early April, we have had the discussion back and forth between the board and administration that the recommendation would be to maintain the tax rate at its current millage.
And this also is a process that each year I point out we have to do before we know what the state budget is. That's also not something you or we designed.
Correct.
That's especially hard this year, probably. Jim?
Yeah, I would just like to say that we talked about this in finance, that I appreciate the, basically our putting off the decision as late as possible, which the 29th I would contend is like almost as late as possible. But the idea is that we will have more information both about, any aid to the states from the federal government and also Penn State's situation, and maybe have a better idea about what the state budget is going to look like. So I appreciate the hard work that you and your folks are doing, Randy, because it's hard work. It really is.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Thanks.
Yep, agreed. I think I'm looking at the projections regarding Act 1 is pretty concerning. It might be worth starting to think about how we might need to communicate with state legislators about the impact of that on school districts going forward. If we're seeing those kind of numbers, something's going to have to give somewhere. So.
Yeah, I saw it the same way. And as you were, the chart where you showed Randy the drop, the significant cuts into the fund balance in the out years, and then going out 5 or 6 years, and trying to wrap my mind around what assumptions were creating that. And when you look at the way in which the Act 1 index works, which it follows the growth in the economy downward, just about the time that we're in greatest need to be able to support our schools and our kids, they're cutting off our opportunity to be able to do that. that's an austerity index. It really is at times like this. So it really is really helpful to see that charted out like that. Thank you.
Sure. So if there's no other questions, I will just ask, if after we leave tonight, I'm hoping that you feel that you have enough information to approve the proposed final budget. But again, if you leave tonight and have any other questions or feel any need for information, please contact board leadership, Scott Lazard, Chair of Finance, or Donna or myself and the superintendent as well. Donna and our team are working very, very hard in this remote setting to keeping all of the financial operations going, as well as budgeting in this very unique time. But the more notice that we have for questions and concerns out there, it definitely helps us a lot. I think we should also mention that Dr. O'Donnell and myself and Mrs. Pierce had a webinar available to our school community, our employees last week, where they had an opportunity to ask a lot of questions. They were given an overview somewhat taken from the multiple different updates that you have received, and from our feedback that we've received, we believe that was very well received on their part, very helpful to them. Although I think that many of them can say that there was not a lot of questions answered with definitiveness. There's just a lot of things that we still don't know yet, and we have to just wait and see. But you understand that. I think that very well.
Laurel?
Yeah, in terms of the things that we might want for a decision, I'm fine with tonight, but we do usually have that grid that divides things out and shows things by both function and object, the different ways we talk about. I know that you've been busy and you did say you'd get it to us for next time, but I just was saying that again, since you specifically asked about things that we felt were important to us in helping make these decisions.
Yep, understood, and you're absolutely correct. We should have that for June 1st.
Thanks. Thank you.
Oops. Any further questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, I'm looking to see, does anyone in the audience have any public comment? Okay, then we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fozard,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. Under information discussion, well, the first item is budget development for 2020, 2021. And so I'll call on Randy Brown and Donna Watson for any further information there. Randy?
No, we presented
it was all within there, right?
Yes.
Nothing more at this time. Okay, right. So the next item is a board resolution on charter school funding. This is shown in attachment 7B.
I just want to share what we've presented, included the 4 bullet points at the top of the memo, and what we did, Randy and I just included those, the gist of those points in the therefore be it resolved section of your current resolution. So we didn't change any aspects of your resolution because they do jibe with the language in there, but that specificity of those 4 areas of consideration, we added them in the resolved as a place for you to consider how you could integrate those. Although we discussed some of these in finance, we wanted to share and focus you on what we did change in this. If there's obviously any other changes, you can discuss those now or ask Randy or me any questions regarding those.
Okay, I don't see any hands. I know Laurel had question about wording?
Yeah.
No, I just, they were looking at the, just put them into order sort of. Because what we got was just the specifics. I moved the whereases and all in. That was all.
Okay.
And
Dan?
I sent that out to
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Dan?
Yep. I was just reviewing them, looking at the 4 bullets, and I know there's some difference of perspective between districts, for example, in suburban Philadelphia, who have enormous costs attached to transporting kids to schools well outside their boundaries, which we don't share. And I think the question gets to be, this is more as much as it is for David as anybody else, would be, to what extent do we need to align our resolution to the needs of not just ourselves, but other districts, be able to get the attention of the legislature, or can we just bring our focus just to our own individual needs, and be less concerned about the transportation costs for out of district travel?
I'll give you my brief take on that, Dan, is that I think there's real value in aligning with the needs of districts across the state. I think that gives more power to the resolution. The data we offer should be relevant to us. And so we can emphasize the data that particularly applies to us. But I think being supportive of issues that affect other districts, I think the more that we can be in agreement, the better off we are.
Sounds good.
I think including especially other districts in our own county
Sure.
that have significant costs in this area. Jim.
Yes, my question was about the 10-mile radius. That not only applies to charter schools, but that also applies to private schools. Is that correct?
Currently, it does, yes.
Okay. All right.
And to clarify in what we have, I apologize because that we scrambled to get this to you. After the 5 miles period, the remainder of that sentence, which was part of the initial draft that you received, that's strike through between our struggling. That doesn't need to be there. Sorry about that.
All right. Lori?
Yeah, I concur with aligning with other districts across the state, but I do think that there's real value in being able to offer the nuances of various districts, and again, just echoing the idea of highlighting our own challenges, because hopefully it will help our legislators think twice about a one-size-fits-all kind of plan for these sorts of school issues. So I in whatever way we can sort of do both, I think it would behoove us to do that, just for the big picture. That's all.
Laura?
Yeah, the transportation is one of those things that while we're addressing it in this context and at this time, it's one of those things that's bad for everybody. It's not just bad for us, it's bad for the charter schools. And we ran into this when we were looking at changing our elementary school day and discovered that we're responsible for their transportation, which made things harder on them as well as us. So it's one of those things that if we can get it from 10 to 5, great. If we could change it so they took care of their own busing, that would be better both for the districts and for us. Because if you think about it, and I think we need to just, if anyone's curious about it, we're not talking about saying, oh, we'd never bus a child more than 10 miles. We're talking about 10 miles outside of our district. And that's very different because, yeah, we bus kids the way we need to within the district, but this is just onerous. And so I think it's important as a general concept that we address this transportation issue. So I think it should be there.
All right. Do I see any other hands raised? Okay, so we'll be looking at a draft of this, or again, for action at our next meeting then. And if you have any further, feedback on the wording, I think we can take that between now and the next meeting. So, okay, so moving on then to board committee reports. Scott, if you would want to provide an update on the Finance and Audit Committee.
Yeah, we really didn't have anything further that we went over aside from what was discussed tonight that I recall. Does anybody have anything to add? I think we went over everything budget-wise,
Agree.
budget-wise.
Yep. Okay, Gretchen, facilities and grounds.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Sorry. Yeah, so in the Facilities and Grounds Committee on Wednesday last week, I believe it was, we talked about the South Track Lighting Agreement, which will be extended for a renewal of the agreement. And pertaining to Memorial Field, we talked about the fact that the district has been looking at options to recognize Galen Dribeless for his donation to SCASD. I think some of the renderings are on that agenda from that meeting if people want to take a look at those. And the construction schedule of Memorial Field, it's 19 days behind due to things associated with COVID, and have to wait and see what happens with the beginning of the football season, and what happens in the future is yet to be determined with the timing of everything and whether or not the field would be ready and whether football will be played or what happens with COVID. And then the other item we discussed was also a part of Memorial Field, the Jacobs Ladder that's planned on the South Concourse. And we talked about whether we could do something different there that would perhaps lead to a decrease in cost to the district. And the committee discussed different possibilities and the pros and the cons of having that remain in the plans versus doing something different like netting or to catch the balls that the Jacobs Ladder was intended to do. But at the same time, there was also an aesthetic component to the Jacobs Ladder. And that's sort of where that's at. And I'm not sure when that's gonna be addressed again. I saw that it was not on tonight's agenda, so I'm not sure where that's gonna go. But right now that was sort of just a discussion that occurred. We already voted on the Park Forest Middle School water line tonight. And then for the future, we are gonna get a playground update. So I just wanted to make that clear that that'll be in the next meeting to discuss the playground update. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Then looking out at future meetings, we have Finance and Audit on May 12th, Facilities and Grounds. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong. Communications Committee on May 19th and Culture, Climate and Learning on May 27th. And those will also be virtual meetings. Then looking out at board reports, Dan, is there anything? I'm sorry, Laurel?
Yeah, I wanted to check because they are the virtual meetings and they're being recorded. I know that our board meetings are still being recorded and they are on the agendas. It's a little different location with board docs. But when I checked, the committee meetings recordings are not listed. And I was hoping they could get put up there. So.
Yeah, this had come up before. One of the things that has gathered my attention over time has been recognized in the way in which our response to the health emergency led to a lot of decisions which are essentially organizational and instructional curriculum-based interventions, but we didn't have much opportunity to review them. And despite everyone's efforts, the enormous amount of commitment that's been required to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish, which has been received very well by the community, I have to mention that as well. There still was information that came up, for example, in the most recent CCL committee meeting that I thought would have really been valuable to hear again or to have available as a record through the recording. So I just want to kind of agree with Laurel to the extent, at least in terms of that particular meeting when we talked about remote learning, be helpful to be able to see a record of that.
Yeah, and I think we talked about during that meeting as well, that it would be helpful to provide that link.
Yes. So if we can have that, that would be great.
All right.
I don't see a problem with it. Where are you requesting these be posted? Just on our board website?
What do you think, Laurel?
Yeah, no, I think, the way we at some point may want to do a guide to find it. It's just getting used to board docs and where they are, because it used to be that when people clicked, there was a big thing at the top that said view video. And now I think you have to go to the agenda this is for past board meetings to find them.
Right, so under.
Yeah, it's just the way it's structured.
Typically, I put them under the video under call to order at the top of the agenda.
Mm-hmm. I mean, typically we don't record committee meetings.
So PSBA's recommendation was not to veer off from what we do currently, to stay, status quo in what we're doing. And so I think between Randy, Bob, and I, we were going to discuss, if we should put the committee recordings on. Randy, are you there?
I am. That's correct, Lynn. Board members, keep in mind that right now it's easy to record a meeting, but when we go back to in-person meetings, it would take a human resource to do that. And so veering off and setting a precedent and then going back, getting away from it may be somewhat difficult. So we wanted to keep that in mind.
I can appreciate that concern, Randy. Thank you.
And I apologize. I thought we had already discussed that with you, but obviously we hadn't.
I don't think we've ever really had a conversation as a board about how we wanted to approach that in this new situation.
Okay.
So I can definitely see, Randy, your consideration of the concern with setting a precedent and PSBA's comment about not straying from our normal course. However, I also think that it's completely acceptable and we all know that this is not the normal course. And we even say at the beginning of the board meeting that, we're basically raising an exception to policy by not having 4 board members there. So my point being, I think that if folks thought that it was helpful to maintain those links in some way during this time of remote meetings and not making it a precursor to, have some precedent set for future meetings that are in person, I think we can head that off the pass by making said statement right now. And it's very upfront that we're doing this solely in this time of craziness, and that the intent is that it wouldn't continue when we get back into face-to-face meetings. So I just think that all things considered, that's a completely adequate and appropriate response that might give people the ability to go back and yet not open Pandora's box for the future. So it's just a thought.
Understood. We'll communicate.
I'd like more time to think about what is the best route to go with this, I guess.
Yeah, just let me know. It can be easily added, so it's not. It's just what you decided, the board.
I think particularly that one CCL meeting that Dan is referring to. That meeting particularly, I think we had talked about within the meeting that it would be worthwhile to post that particular conversation because it was so informative.
It's very rich. And maybe there's a way, I don't want to take this too far afield without having an opportunity for full board discussion, but Scott, I think it would be reasonable to think about adding a sentence or two to those qualifying statements at the beginning of the board meeting that might reference the committee recordings as a temporary solution to this temporary problem. There could be a way to in a sense, it could be a little more transparent about that, but also make it dedicated to this health emergency that we're involved in. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I guess I would like to circle back to this after further conversation with outside of just this venue at the moment.
Communications committee tomorrow.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why don't we add that to the agenda?
There you go, Jim.
We are absolutely talking about community understanding tomorrow, and we're hoping to use sort of assess the committee members in regards to the community's understanding relating to the budget. We'll share what we learned with our employees. As Randy said, we had about 500 people participate with us recently on our webinar, and our reason to do that really was the feedback through our team around the district, with principals included, was that we had many employees who really didn't understand what we're facing even with this current scenario. So I imagine there's some of that misunderstanding or lack of understanding in the community too. So we'll absolutely add this one to that agenda too.
Okay. So now I think we're on to board reports. With Central Intermediate Unit.
Our next CIU board meeting is this Thursday evening. It's also available by Zoom. Everyone's invited to join us if you'd like and observe. But it's 6 o'clock on Thursday evening.
All right. National School Boards Association, Pennsylvania School Boards Association, David.
I really don't have much to add from what I said at the top of the meeting.
Okay. Scott, anything from the Education Foundation meeting, was there?
Yeah, we had a meeting on May 6th. The topics, not a whole lot to report. The topics covered an update on the Mental Health Matters fundraising. There was some discussion about Memorial Field fundraising and advertising, the Student Opportunities Grant Program. There's also an opportunity to work with a local business who's selling T-shirts and interested in providing funds to the foundation. We did talk about the Maroon and Gray dinner. That is tentatively, we're looking at November for moving that to, but there's an equal amount of conversation about whether we do that, whether we have two of them closer together, just exactly what the right vibe is to create for the community relative to the Maroon and Gray dinner. Audit report from Baker Tilly, that's about it. Our next meeting is June 3rd.
Thanks. And so we don't have any CAC meetings, I think, happening since the shutdown. Is that correct? Nobody's been running CACs. So then looking now towards future agenda planning, you can see the approval of the contract with School Specialty Memorial Field donor signage and bid for oil and gas. We'll continue to be working on the budget at all of our future meetings between now and the end of the fiscal year. And with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Bizarre, so moved.
Laurel, second.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we are adjourned to executive session then.